Imagine waking up in the morning, reaching for your phone, and immediately being pulled into a storm of noise. Dozens of unread messages, endless streams of breaking news, social media arguments, and opinions that blur the line between truth and distortion. Within minutes, your mind feels heavy, overwhelmed, and no matter how much you try to process it all, the more you think, the more confused you become. Have you ever felt that way? This isn't just your story, it's the story of our time. We live in an age where information is more accessible than ever, yet clarity of thought has never been harder to achieve. Most people today don't really think clearly, they react instead of reflect. They allow emotions and impulses to drive them, rather than reason and wisdom. And the cost of unclear thinking shows itself everywhere. In poor decisions, broken relationships, missed opportunities, and a life that often feels as though it's slipping away in chaos. If you've ever asked yourself, how can I think more clearly? How can I keep my mind steady in the middle of this storm? Then this episode is for you. Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who carried the weight of an empire during wars, plagues, and political turmoil, and yet managed to preserve a sense of inner clarity that still inspires the world today. His private writings, collected in meditations, are not just personal notes. They're a living manual for anyone who wants to practice the art of clear thinking, no matter how messy life gets. And let's be clear from the beginning, what you'll hear today is not a collection of quick tips, productivity hacks, or shallow advice designed to make you feel good for 5 minutes. No, Marcus Aurelius taught something deeper, something more enduring. Clear thinking isn't about speed, it's about accuracy. It isn't about outsmarting others, it's about being honest with yourself. It isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering perspective. That's the kind of wisdom we'll uncover together. So as you listen, I invite you to see this not as a lecture, but as a conversation with one of the greatest minds of history, a conversation that still speaks directly to the struggles of modern life. And if you find value here, remember, you're part of StoicCraft, a space where we bring ancient philosophy into today's world to help you live not just calmer, but stronger, sharper, and more resilient in the face of everything life throws your way. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But if that's true, why does it often feel like our minds are anything but under control? Why do we so easily fall into confusion, doubt, and cloudy thinking? The answer lies in the way the human mind is wired. From the Stoic perspective, it isn't the world itself that overwhelms us, but our judgments about the world. The facts of life are neutral. What makes them heavy, chaotic, or unbearable is the filter we apply the emotions, the assumptions, and the fears we attach to them. Marcus saw this firsthand. As emperor, he was surrounded by constant pressure, wars on the borders, political intrigue within the Senate, a devastating plague that swept across the empire. The external world was never quiet for him, and yet, in his writings, he continually reminded himself, the noise outside is not the problem. The real danger is the noise inside. Now, think about how that applies to us today. We're not ruling an empire, but in a way, we're facing our own storms. The endless notifications on our phones, the stream of half-truths and strong opinions online, the pressures of work, family, and finances, all of these bombard us daily. And the more we let them in without discipline, the cloudier our thinking becomes. Modern psychology backs this up. Researchers talk about cognitive overload, when the brain is flooded with more information than it can reasonably process. In that state, our decision-making declines, our memory weakens, and our emotions take over. We scroll through news feeds, flipping from global crises to celebrity gossip, from financial advice to personal drama. And the result is not wisdom, it's confusion, Marcus Aurelius understood this 2,000 years ago. He wrote that most of what people say and do is unnecessary, and if you let the unnecessary invade your mind, you lose the ability to see clearly what truly matters. In other words, clutter in, clutter out. Let's bring this closer to real life. Imagine two people at work facing the same situation. Their manager gives them critical feedback. The first person immediately reacts emotionally. They think, "My boss hates me. I'm not good enough. This is unfair." Their mind spirals. Every new thought is tinted with fear or anger. The second person, however, pauses. They remind themselves, what happened here? A manager gave feedback. That's the fact. My interpretation of it, positive or negative, is up to me. This second person is more likely to respond constructively because they separate the event from the cloud of emotion. This is exactly the kind of clarity Marcus trained himself in. To him, confusion wasn't just a mental mistake, it was a moral failure, because it meant abandoning reason, the very thing that makes us human. The Stoics believed that the purpose of life was to live in harmony with nature, and for humans, nature means reason. To think unclearly is to live against your nature. But here's the paradox. We often think that more analysis will give us clarity. We assume that if we keep thinking about a problem long enough, the answer will reveal itself. Yet more often, the opposite happens. We overthink. We add layers of what-ifs and imagine scenarios until the original issue is buried under speculation. Marcus warned against this. He urged himself to strip things down to their essence. Don't think in circles. Think simply, directly, and truthfully. So why does human thinking become clouded? Because we let emotions rule over reason. Because we invite too much noise into our minds. Because we fail to distinguish what is necessary from what is not. And because we confuse overthinking with clear thinking. Let me ask you this. How many times in your life have you made a decision in anger or fear that you later regretted? How many times did the situation look far worse in your head than it actually was in reality? That's the power of clouded thinking, and it's why Marcus Aurelius insisted that mastering the mind was more important than mastering an empire. Clear thinking begins with recognition. Most of what clouds our minds doesn't come from the outside world, but from the stories we tell ourselves about it. Once you see that, you've already taken the first step toward clarity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, if you are pained by anything external, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment of it. This simple yet profound statement captures one of the deepest Stoic principles, the discipline of seeing things as they are without exaggeration, without distortion, without the fog of emotion. Why does this matter so much? Because the way you see an event determines the way you respond to it. If your perception is clouded, your reaction will be misguided. But if your perception is clear, your response has the chance to be wise. For the Stoics, clarity of perception was the first step toward clarity of life. Think about how often we fail at this today. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and instantly we assign meaning. They disrespected me. People are terrible drivers. The world is full of selfish idiots. Notice what happened. The fact the car cut in front was neutral, but the story we added made it personal, dramatic, and emotional. Instead of seeing the event for what it was, we inflated it with judgments that only harmed us. Marcus warned himself about this again and again. He would write lines like, "Remove the opinion, and you are saved from the complaint. I have been harmed. Remove the complaint. I have been harmed. And the harm itself is removed." What he was telling himself and what he tells us is that events are bare. It's our interpretation that dresses them up in anger, fear, or sorrow. This principle isn't just philosophy, it's a practical tool for daily living. Imagine walking into a difficult meeting at work. The facts are, you are present. Your colleagues are present. and there's an agenda to discuss. But before the meeting even begins, your mind might be spinning. They're going to judge me. I'll probably mess this up. My boss doesn't like me. By the time you speak, you're already tense and defensive, not because of reality, but because of the imagined layer you placed on top of it. The Stoic practice is to strip those layers away. To say, what is actually happening here? What do I know for certain? What assumptions am I adding? This shift from storytelling to reality is powerful. It gives you room to breathe, to act with reason instead of reacting with fear. Modern psychology has a name for this too: cognitive reframing. Therapists encourage people to identify the difference between a fact and an interpretation. The Stoics were teaching the same thing 2,000 years ago. They believed that wisdom begins when you discipline your perception. Of course, this doesn't mean ignoring emotions or pretending life is easy. Marcus never denied that hardship exists. He faced wars, betrayal, even the deaths of his own children. But when he encountered these tragedies, he pushed himself to see them clearly. Do not say, "It is misfortune." Say, "To bear this well is good fortune." The event itself was neither good nor bad, it was his perspective that determined its meaning. Ask yourself, how many of your stresses come not from reality, but from the story you attach to it? How often do you make things heavier by calling them unfair, disrespectful, or disastrous before you even had time to respond? The Stoic challenge is to pause, remove the adjectives, and look at the noun, the bare effect. Here's a practical exercise, directly inspired by Marcus. The next time something bothers you, write it down in its simplest form. Instead of, "My colleague humiliated me in the meeting," write, "My colleague spoke words. People heard them." Notice the shift. One version keeps you trapped in pain. The other shows you reality without distortion. From that place, you can decide how to respond with strength instead of weakness. Clear thinking, Marcus believed, is not about avoiding difficulty. It's about avoiding illusion. The world is complex enough as it is. Why add layers of confusion to it? To see things as there is, to give yourself the gift of freedom. Freedom from unnecessary suffering. Freedom from emotional slavery. And freedom to act with wisdom. When you strip events down to their essence, what's left is something simple, manageable, and human. And once you master that discipline, you begin to see with the eyes of a philosopher and live with the strength of a Stoic. Epictetus, another great Stoic, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This idea, simple on the surface, contains one of the hardest disciplines of life: learning to control emotions before they control you. Because nothing clouds the mind faster than unchecked anger, fear, or despair. Marcus Aurelius wrestled with this truth daily. As emperor, he couldn't afford to lose clarity in the face of chaos. He reminded himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. For him, emotional self-control wasn't about denial, it was about freedom. By mastering his response, he kept his judgment clear, his mind steady, and his actions aligned with reason. Now, bring this into our world. We live in a time where emotional reactions are amplified, even rewarded. Social media thrives on outrage. News headlines are designed to provoke fear or anger. At work, one harsh email can ruin a whole day. At home, one careless word from a loved one can spiral into a conflict. The modern environment pushes us toward emotional reactivity, and yet, that very reactivity is what clouds our ability to think and act wisely. Think of the last time you snapped at someone in anger. In that heated moment, were your words thoughtful? Probably not. Anger narrows your perspective. It convinces you that your judgment in the moment is absolute truth. Later, with a cooler head, you often regret it. That regret is the proof that the emotion distorted your clarity. The Stoics weren't asking us to become emotionless robots. Marcus Aurelius felt grief when he buried his children. He felt the sting of betrayal, but he also knew that indulging those emotions endlessly would cloud his ability to lead. Instead of asking, "How do I stop feeling?" he asked, "How do I stop feeling from ruling me?" That distinction is crucial. Modern science echoes this wisdom. Neuroscientists explain how the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, can hijack the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for a reasoned decision-making. When we're angry or afraid, blood flow literally shifts away from the rational part of the brain. That's why emotional clarity isn't automatic. It requires training. The Stoics were practicing emotional regulation long before psychology gave it a name. So how can we practice this discipline today? One Stoic strategy is the pause. Marcus wrote, "If you are troubled by something, ask, will this matter in a month, in a year, in a lifetime?" That pause creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, clarity lives. Before replying to that email, before escalating that argument, before making that risky decision, you pause. You ask, what's really happening here? What's in my control? What story am I telling myself that's making this worse? Another practice is reframing. Instead of thinking, "This is a disaster," you might think, "This is a test." Instead of, "I've lost everything," you ask, "What is still within my power?" Reframing doesn't deny reality, it redirects your perspective. It trains the mind to stay steady instead of drowning in emotion. Consider a real-world example. Two people lose their jobs. One immediately panics, drowning in anger, blaming everyone. Their mind clouds, and they make rash decisions. The other, while still feeling the sting, pauses and reframes. "I can't control the layoff, but I can control how I respond. I can update my skills. I can search for opportunities. I can keep my dignity." The same event to entirely different outcomes, shaped by emotional clarity. Marcus Aurelius called this the discipline of assent. When an impression enters your mind, whether it's fear, anger, or sorrow, you have a choice. You can assent to it, letting it take over, or you can challenge it. You can ask, "Is this true? Is this useful? Does this serve my reason?" By controlling which impressions you allow to rule, you maintain sovereignty over your mind. Let me ask you, how much of your suffering comes not from reality itself, but from emotions that grew unchecked? How many times have you magnified a problem, not because it was big, but because anger or fear made it seem bigger than it was? The Stoics remind us that emotions are like storms, they pass. But if you let them steer your ship, you will be wrecked. Clarity requires discipline. It requires slowing down when the world is speeding you up. It requires questioning your own feelings, even when they feel justified. And most importantly, it requires remembering that your power lies not in controlling events, but in mastering your response. Marcus lived in a world as turbulent as ours was, plagues, betrayals. Yet he left behind writings filled not with bitterness, but with calm reflection. That's the mark of someone who refused to let emotions cloud his mind. If he could cultivate that discipline as Emperor of Rome, perhaps we can begin to cultivate it in our daily lives. One pause, one reframing, one act of emotional clarity at a time. If there is one Stoic principle that has echoed louder than all the others throughout history, it is this: learn to separate what is within your control from what is not. Marcus Aurelius lived by this rule. Epictetus taught it as the very foundation of philosophy. And yet, despite its simplicity, most of us spend our entire lives ignoring it. Why is this distinction so powerful? Because most of our stress, frustration, and despair come from wasting energy on what lies outside our reach. We rage at traffic jams, at the economy, at the way other people behave. We wish the past were different. We worry about the future, and all the while, The one thing truly in our control, our own judgment. Our own choices sits neglected. Marcus Aurelius was brutally honest with himself about this. In Meditations he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice he doesn't promise you comfort, or success, or control over the world. He promises you strength, the kind of strength that comes when you finally stop fighting battles you can never win. Consider how this plays out in modern life. Take the workplace. You can't control whether your company restructures, or whether the market dips, or whether your boss has a bad day. But you can control your preparation, your professionalism, and the way you carry yourself. The person who obsesses over the uncontrollable becomes anxious, bitter, even paralyzed. The person who focuses on the controllable becomes resilient. Think about relationships. You cannot control how another person feels about you. You cannot control if they choose to stay or leave. What you can control is your integrity, whether you speak honestly, whether you act with respect, whether you maintain your self-respect even when others don't. Marcus would remind himself not to be angry at figs for not bearing grapes. In other words, don't waste life demanding the impossible of people. Focus instead on being the kind of person you can respect in the mirror. This distinction also applies to broader society. We worry endlessly about politics, global crises, economic forecasts. Of course, these things matter. But Marcus would ask, what is yours to do here? What action lies within your grasp? Vote yes. Work hard, yes. Speak truth when you can. Beyond that, accept. Obsessing about what is out of reach only clouds the mind and robs you of clarity for the duties that actually belong to you. Modern psychology has a term for this as well. The circle of control. Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, distinguished between the circle of concern, all the things we care about but cannot control, and the circle of influence, the things we can actually act upon. The Stoics were making the same point to millennia earlier. Peace of mind comes not from shrinking your concerns, but from aligning them with reality. Imagine two sailors caught in a storm. One curses the sky, panics about the waves, and collapses into despair. The other acknowledges the storm, but focuses on the ropes, the sails, the rudder, what can be managed. The storm remains, but only one sailor preserves clarity. Life is that storm. You cannot calm the sea, but you can learn to steer. Here's a practice you might try. The next time you feel stressed, write down the source of your stress. Then divide it into 2 lists. 1, what's within my control. 2, what's not. Be ruthless in your honesty. If you can't directly change it, it goes in the second list. Then, commit yourself to acting only on the first list. This is Stoicism in action, not an abstract philosophy, but a daily discipline that clears the mind and strengthens the will. Let me ask you, how many hours of your life have you wasted replaying a conversation you can't undo, or fearing an outcome you can't predict? What could you accomplish if all that energy were redirected to what you can control: your preparation, your choices, your principles? Marcus Aurelius lived in a world that often seemed out of control: wars, plagues, betrayals. Yet he didn't despair. He returned again and again to this principle. Don't demand that events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will flow well. That's not resignation, it's clarity. It's the realization that freedom lies not in bending reality to your will, but in aligning your will with reality. In a chaotic age like us, this lesson is not just philosophical, it's survival. To distinguish what is and isn't in your control is to reclaim your mind from confusion. It's to refuse the slavery of frustration and step into the strength of clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple words, clear, direct, without ornament. This was not just advice, it was a philosophy of living. For Marcus, clarity of thought depended on simplicity. The more complex and tangled our thinking becomes, the harder it is to act with wisdom. Simplicity is not the same as shallowness. Shallow thinking ignores complexity. Simple thinking cuts through it. It takes a mass of confusion and distills it into the essential truth. That's why Marcus constantly reminded himself to strip away the unnecessary. He believed that beneath all the noise, there was always something clean and true waiting to be seen. Consider how often modern life pushes us in the opposite direction. We are told that to be intelligent is to juggle endless details, to complicate our explanations, to analyze a problem from every angle until nothing is clear anymore. We praise busyness as if a cluttered calendar equals a meaningful life. But more often, complexity is a mask for confusion. Simplicity, on the other hand, is a mark of mastery. Take decision-making as an example. How many times have you agonized over a choice career, relationships, investments, turning it over and over in your head until you felt paralyzed? That paralysis is often the result of overthinking. The Stoic approach is different. Marcus would ask, what is the essential here? What's the right thing to do? What lies within my control? By focusing on the core, you cut away the noise and see the path forward. Think of historical leaders known for clarity. Abraham Lincoln often reduced debates to a single essential principle. Steve Jobs, in building Apple, was famous for cutting out features and focusing on simplicity. In both cases, their ability to distill complexity into clear, simple action was their greatest strength. Marcus was practicing the same art, though. Instead of building a company, he was ruling an empire and, more importantly, ruling himself. This principle applies not only to decisions but also to communication. Marcus cautioned against using elaborate words to impress others. He believed truth should be stated plainly, without decoration. Today, in a world of spin, clickbait, and overblown marketing, this wisdom feels radical. Imagine how refreshing it would be if more people spoke simply and honestly, saying only what they truly meant. Simplicity in speech builds trust. Complexity often breeds suspicion. But let's be honest, simplicity is difficult. It requires the courage to cut away what is unnecessary. And most of us cling to the unnecessary because it feels safe. We hide behind long explanations because we fear being judged if our ideas are laid bare. We pile on tasks because busyness makes us feel important. Simplicity exposes us, yet it is only through that exposure that clarity is found. The Stoics practiced exercises to cultivate this. One was to reduce fears to their simplest form. For example, I am afraid of losing my job. What does that really mean? Stripped down, it might become, I may lose income. Stripped further, I may have to live with less. At its essence, I will still be alive, still able to act, still able to think. By simplifying the fear, you strip it of its power. Try this yourself. Take one thing that's been bothering you: anxiety, a conflict, a looming decision. Write down everything swirling in your mind about it. Then, like Marcus, strip it down. What's the core fact? What is true, without exaggeration? What is the essential choice to be made? Often, you will find that the problem is not as overwhelming as your mind made it. Simplicity in thinking also allows for focus. The mind is like a lens. Scatter the light, and it illuminates nothing. Focus it, and it can cut through steel. When you simplify, you focus. When you focus, you see clearly. Let me ask you, in your own life, how many of your struggles are made heavier by complexity? How many of your decisions would become easier if you had the courage to strip them down to their essence? Marcus Aurelius led armies, governed millions, and yet in his private notes he constantly told himself to keep things simple. That should remind us, if simplicity was powerful enough to guide an emperor, it is powerful enough to guide us. Simplicity is not weakness. It is clarity. It is strength. It is the art of seeing life as it really is, and having the courage to act on what matters most. And in a world drowning in noise, perhaps nothing is more radical or more necessary than to think simply. Marcus Aurelius never woke up with a perfectly clear mind. He wasn't born with some supernatural gift of clarity. He trained it day after day, through practices that might seem ordinary on the surface but were, in reality, extraordinary in their impact. His meditations are the clearest proof of this. Private notes, written not to impress others, but to remind himself how to see the world without distortion. That's the first thing we need to understand. Clarity isn't something you stumble upon by accident. It's something you cultivate with habits, small choices that add up over time. Don't think about it. How often do we say to ourselves, "I wish I could think more clearly," and then we wait, as if clarity will descend on us like sunlight breaking through clouds. But Marcus shows us that clarity is less like a sudden beam of light and more like tending a flame. You protect it, you feed it, you practice it. Otherwise, it flickers and dies in the winds of life. One of his most powerful practices was writing. Each evening, he put pen to parchment and wrestled with his own mind. He would describe the frustrations of the day, the moments when he felt anger or fear, and then he would reason his way back to calmness. He would remind himself that the insults of others were just words, that death was natural, that hardship was an opportunity to show virtue. In modern terms, we'd call this journaling, but for him, it was more than that. It was mental training. Imagine if you did the same. Instead of letting your thoughts swirl chaotically, you forced them onto the page, stripped them of exaggeration, and saw them for what they were. Over time, this habit doesn't just clear the page, it clears the mind. Marcus also understood the importance of starting the day with preparation. He would wake up and tell himself, "Today you will meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness," not because he was pessimistic, but because he wanted to be ready. When those things happened, as they inevitably would, he wasn't surprised. He had already rehearsed his response. Compare that with how most of us start our mornings. We reach for our phones, get hit with 100 distractions before breakfast, and then wonder why our minds feel scattered. What if, instead, we paused? Just 2 minutes of reflection before diving into the noise, asking ourselves, what is truly in my control today? What can I not control? What kind of person do I want to be? That simple pause changes everything. It centers the mind before the storm arrives. But Marcus also knew that clarity required guarding the mind from too much noise. In his day, that meant avoiding gossip and pointless chatter. In our day, it means managing the flood of information that pours into our lives. Every notification, every headline, every pointless argument online, each one pulls at our attention. And the more cluttered our inputs, the more clouded our thoughts. So the discipline here is simple but not easy. Choose what you let in. Be ruthless. Do you really need to check the news 10 times a day? Do you need to scroll through people's opinions about everything under the sun? The quality of your thoughts depends on the quality of what you allow into your mind. And then there is silence. The Stoics valued silence not because they wanted to escape the world, but because they knew that wisdom doesn't shout at whispers. Seneca admitted, "I have often regretted my speech, never my silence." Marcus would retreat to quiet moments even in the middle of war. He knew that stillness clears the fog better than constant analysis. And so should we. 5 minutes of silence, a walk without headphones, a few deep breaths, these aren't luxuries. They're maintenance for the mind. Clarity doesn't always come from thinking harder. Sometimes it comes from allowing your thoughts to settle, the way muddy water clears when left undisturbed. Finally, Marcus practiced ending the day with review. He would ask himself where he succeeded, where he failed, what he could do better. not with self-hatred, but with honesty. Each night became a mirror, reflecting back the truth of how he lived. That way, each morning he could begin again with more wisdom than the day before. Imagine the power of this simple practice, to treat each day as a lesson, each failure as material for growth, each success as confirmation that virtue is possible. All of these habits: writing, preparing, limiting noise, practicing silence, reviewing, are not spectacular on their own. They don't create fireworks, but together, repeated day after day, they carve out a mind that is resilient, calm, and clear. They train you to see things as they are, not as your fears or frustrations would have them. Ask yourself, if you practiced these habits for a year, what would change? If every morning you grounded yourself, if every evening you reflected honestly, if throughout the day you guarded your attention and sought moments of stillness, how much sharper would your judgment be? How much lighter would your mind feel? Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, surrounded by demands we can scarcely imagine. Yet he found time for these practices. If he could, what excuse do we have? Clear thinking is not reserved for philosophers or rulers. It's available to all of us, but only if we are willing to practice it as a discipline. In the end, clarity is not a gift. It's a craft, and like any craft, it is built through habit. Practice these habits long enough, and clarity stops being something you chase. It becomes something you carry with you, steady and unshakable, like a flame that lights your path. Know how dark the world becomes when we step back and look at what Marcus Aurelius left us. It becomes clear that his wisdom was not about ruling an empire, but about ruling the mind. He showed us that confusion is not inevitable, that clarity is a choice we make each moment, in how we see, how we respond, and how we discipline our thoughts. The lessons we've explored: seeing things as they are, controlling emotions, distinguishing what is within our control, seeking simplicity, and building daily habits are not abstract ideals. They are practices for life. Think about it. Every time you pause before reacting, you protect your clarity. Every time you strip a problem down to its essence, you protect your clarity. Every time you remind yourself of what is in your control and let go of what isn't, you protect your clarity. It's in those small, daily acts that the fog begins to lift and the mind becomes sharper, calmer, and freer. But clarity is not just for you. When you think clearly, the people around you benefit. Your family feels your steadiness. Your colleagues feel your reason. Your friends feel your wisdom. In a world that thrives on noise and reaction, clarity is a rare gift, and those who carry it become a source of strength for others. That is why Marcus Aurelius' teachings are still alive today. Because the world will always need men and women who can stay calm when others panic, who can see truth when others see only fear, who can lead not with noise but with reason. So let me ask you, what would your life look like if you practiced these lessons, not just once, but every day? How many mistakes would you avoid? How many unnecessary arguments would dissolve? How many opportunities would you finally see clearly, simply because your mind was not clouded? The promise of Stoicism is not perfection, it is progress. A little more clarity each day, a little more peace, a little more strength. And that is where you come in. If you found value in these ideas, if Marcus Aurelius' wisdom has spoken to something deep within you, then don't let it end here. Take one practice, just one, and apply it today. Write down your thoughts tonight. Prepare your mind tomorrow morning. Sit in silence for 5 minutes. Whatever it is, begin. Because philosophy is not meant to be admired from a distance, it is meant to be lived. Here at StoicCraft, that is our mission, to bring ancient wisdom into the modern world, to help you live not just with calm, but with courage, clarity, and resilience. So, if this message resonates with you, I invite you to join us. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and continue walking this path with us. Because the world needs more clarity, and it begins with each of us choosing to cultivate it.